Good evening. Hope things are well with the Rosemary Church tonight, with all of you, that you're overcoming under the circumstances. I read a book about the commentary on the book of Philippians at one point in my life, and that was the title of the commentary, Overcoming Under the Circumstances. And that's what Paul was doing when he wrote that letter. He was sitting in prison, but he writes them the letter that is most filled with advice about being joy-filled and content with where we are. And that last one, being content with where we are, seems to be an especially difficult proposition for us as Americans. A couple of things before we get into our lesson tonight. I appreciated the opportunity last week to sit downstairs and have what I called my fireside chat with you. That felt good. We may do that again sometime over winter if we have a particularly cold Wednesday night. But mostly I want to tell you that Carolyn, who arrived last week during the programming, arrived home safely in Pennsylvania tonight about 6 o'clock. And she's actually thinking about moving here to somewhere here in eastern North Carolina. She liked it very much. She liked the people here. And she's in a situation, her father passed away, and there's a house to be sold, and she has a property of her own that she needs to get rid of. So we'll see what happens with all that, but I appreciated you letting me introduce you to one of our friends from Pennsylvania who was part of the last church where I served up there. What I want to do tonight as we begin is talk with you for a few minutes about my friend Li Hanjing, who is a minister in Kunming, China. Kunming is in southwest China. It is near the border of Laos and Thailand and Cambodia and Vietnam, and it is a place where there is some political turmoil, particularly in the mountainous areas going towards those borders. It's kind of a touchy situation from a political perspective for the Chinese. But Lee has been leading a church of about 120, 130 people. And the police have come and told their landlord that he may not rent to them. They have been disbanded by the government. They've started watching in house churches, or worshiping in house churches. But Lee is feeling very insecure at the moment. He knows that he and some of the other church members are being watched by the police. And of course he has a new baby and a wife to take care of, and it is questionable whether the church there will be able to continue to support him in the way that they have. So I want to begin tonight with a prayer for Lee and for the Christians in China in this time of more intense government scrutiny and persecution. Father God, thank you for allowing us to call you our Father. Thank you for claiming us as your children. Thank you, Father, that even though we feel like we're suffering here in America with the COVID and with political unrest and those kinds of things, we are still safe from direct and overt persecution. But that is not true for your people around the world. And so tonight I want to pray for two families in particular. One is for Lee and his wife, Yang, and for their baby, and for their well-being, for their safety. Father, keep them safe from the police, keep them close to you, and Father, help them to find new ways to serve you and be faithful to you. And Father, I don't know how Lee's finances are going to be handled or what's going to happen there, but I thank you that you have given us the opportunity to be aware about it and to lift him up to you in prayer. The other family, Father, is the Zook family in Bali, who are working with their children growing up there in a Muslim country. And their role is to rescue women who have been sold into the sex slave trade and get them cleaned up and teach them about Jesus and train them for a different kind of work. And Father, they've been struggling financially and with visas, and Mrs. Zook has had a stroke. And while she seems to be covering, Father, it's been a very difficult year for them. And so those two families who are in other parts of the world, leading your people and serving you, Father, we ask your blessing upon them. And may they be encouraged with the sure knowledge that there are Christians here in America and around the world who share in their sorrows, share in their joys, and are very concerned for their well-being. Father, protect them, I ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Tonight we'll be back in 1 Samuel. We're going to go back to finish up Samuel, who is the last of the prophets. By the way, I had someone ask me, was Samuel really a prophet? And in the beginning of his story, we don't learn that. We learn about it as we read about his work. I'm sorry, not was Samuel a prophet. Was Samuel really a judge, one of the judges? And the answer is yes. But we don't find that, as I started to say, in the beginning of his life. We find it as he's living out his ministry as a priest and a prophet. He is also traveling to 3 other cities. He has 4 places set up, including his hometown, where he judges the people of Israel. But in thinking about tonight and why we're going through 1 Samuel to catch up with the last of the judges, Karl Barth was a very important, prominent German theologian from the last century. And he had some advice for those who want to preach. And this is what he said. Preach using the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. Now that quote, that part of the quote, has been repeated over and over and over and attributed to a lot of other people. But it's a good advice. Preach the Bible. Preach using the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. And the point that he was making is that all of the scriptures relate to real life. That God is a God not just of Sunday morning worship, but is a God for a whole world and for all of our life. He's a whole life God. And that we need to help people understand the relationship between God and his truth and his promises to everyday existence and everyday living. The second part of his statement is not frequently quoted, but is equally important. And that says, I'll start at the beginning again, preach using the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other, but interpret newspapers from your Bible. In other words, don't take current events and read them back into the Bible and say, now I know when the end of the world is, or now I understand that God loves these politicians and not these politicians. That's not the way to do this. It is correct to take the scriptures and listen to God's voice as he deals with real life people in real life situations and make personal and cultural application in our own world. And so that's what I want to do tonight. What I do not want to do is focus primarily on current events. Because if I do, then I become a pundit that just tells you my opinion about the news. Or I might betray the gospel in order to make it not appear to be applicable to something that's near and dear to my heart. Or I might present it as a narrow set of issues and miss the big picture. In other words, I might focus on one particular thing that's of interest to me and fail to help us as a church see where God is at work from within the whole culture and the whole world. So what I want to do is I want to take the scriptures and I want to talk about some principles in these first few chapters tonight that I believe are very applicable in our time, in our place, in our culture, but I want you to make your own application. I do not want to be the editor or the of how you think. I don't want to be the editor of interpretation for the application. What I want to do is help you see that God's word is true, even from 2,000 years or so, maybe only 1,000 years before Christ, to 2,000 years afterward. The things that God does with people are still the same. And the things that God wants us to understand have never changed. And he wants us to know that he is in charge, that his word is true, and that people may break themselves on his word, but his truth is never broken. And so let's go back to chapter 3 of 1 Samuel and look at a couple of things here. If you remember, Samuel is a child of promise, and he is given to Eli, the high priest, to raise. And so let's beginning at chapter 3. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. So God is at work. Eli is the high priest. His sons are priests underneath him. And Samuel is ministering before the Lord under Eli. Notice it says the boy Samuel. And I think that's an important word for us. We need to take our youngsters, our children, and allow them to help with everything that we do that relates to God. Now, I don't mean that we should take a 3-year-old and set them up front and say, preach a sermon. But Samuel is working under Eli's supervision, but he is actively involved in what's going on. And, whether that when pre-COVID, whether that when being passing a collection plate or standing at the door and saying hello like the adults do, or shaking somebody's hand, learning how to be an adult Christian is a mentoring process, not just a teaching process, not just a Sunday school process. And so that's what's happening here. Eli is mentoring Samuel on how to be God's child, becoming God's man. And with the same thing for our girls, with our women, finding the right roles where they are working with adult women who are mature Christians who say, where they can learn by example. These are the things that a woman of God is about. These are the things for the guys that a man of God is about. And so one night, Eli, verse 2, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. And the lamp of God had not yet gone out. Remember, they kept a light going in the tabernacle. And Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord. Now, temple, it really is the tabernacle. It's a tent. The temple has not yet been built, not until Solomon comes on the scene. Samuel is lying down in the tabernacle of the Lord where the ark of the God was. And the Lord called to Samuel. And Samuel answered, "Here I am." What a great answer. When we hear God's voice, we say, "Here I am." When we hear God calling, how do we answer? But what does he do? He's a boy. So he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and he lay down. And again the Lord called Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." My son Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, meaning God had not spoken to him personally as one of the prophets up until this point. And so the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel a third time, and Samuel got up, went to Eli, and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli, finally, realized that the Lord was calling the boy. I wonder how Eli felt about that. Just curious. The Bible doesn't tell us. But here he is, this old man. He's losing his sight, but he's still the high priest, and God speaks to this child instead of him. Eli has a great attitude. He knows that God has called Samuel. He knows he's mentoring him. And what does he do? Does he get jealous? Does he get angry? Or any of those things that we might know? What he does is this. He says, verse 9, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Then the Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other time, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Listen to what God tells this probably, who knows, 10, 12, 14-year-old boy. And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears of it tingle." That is a very moderate way, a very mild way of saying, watch what's going to happen. Am I going to wake everybody up? And when God's going to do that, wow, that's going to be a big deal. So he says, I'm going to do something that will make the ears of everyone who hears it tingle. At that time, I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons made themselves contemptible, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. Here is Eli, an old man. He has served God faithfully, but his sons have not. His sons have learned all the right words. They've learned all the right routines. They're going through all the right motions, but their heart does not belong to God. In their practices, they're taking the best of the meat for themselves from the sacrifices instead of offering it to God. They're having affairs with the women that come to the tabernacle and pretending that it's okay because they're God's man and God would bless them. God's behind everything they do. They are using God for their own glory, for their own satisfaction, for all those kinds of things. And so God has been upset, and the problem is that Samuel did nothing about it. Now, I recognize that when our children become adults, however our culture defines adults, we lose control and authority over them. But Samuel still had control and authority over the things of God, and he failed to exercise that authority. And so because he failed to correct his sons, because he failed to forbid them and to do the things they were doing or put them out of the temple, the tabernacle, God says, I'm going to punish them, and Eli's house will no longer be in the line of the high priest. So it says in verse 15, Samuel lay down until morning, and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision. But Eli called him and said, Samuel, my son? And Samuel answered, Here I am. What was it he said to you? Eli asked. Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you. Now, I want you to imagine yourself being Samuel. Here you are. You are serving this man. You are being mentored by him, trained to become the high priest. You have all these feelings and emotions of love for this man who has become your surrogate father. And you got this terrible message from God about what's going to happen to Eli's family. I would be scared to death to tell Eli what God said. I'd be terrified at the idea of hurting this person that I know that loves me. But Eli has the strength and faith to say, Samuel, tell me what God said and don't hold it back. It'll be okay. And I just want you to think about the dynamics of that relationship, of how strong it had to be. Verse 18. So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, and listen to this, the words from Eli, He is the Lord, let him do what is good in his eyes. That must have been extremely difficult for Eli to say. He knows his sons are wrong. He's failed to correct them. He's too old to do anything about it now. But his life is pulled together. His life is held together by the authority of God. God's word is true, and God's love is great and faithful. So Eli says, God is good. Whatever he decides, it's okay. And Samuel is amazing. Verse 19, then the Lord was with Samuel as he grew up. Now that statement is why I said Samuel at this point probably is 10, 12, maybe a young teenager, but probably 10 to 12 years old, maybe even a little bit younger. But it says the Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of his words fall to the ground. Now, in the Hebrew, that sentence can be interpreted two different ways or translated two different ways. One is that God did not let Samuel say anything that was wrong. The other is that Samuel did not misinterpret or misuse anything that God said. The end result is kind of the same, that God blessed Samuel to be able to speak his truth, and Samuel was committed to doing that. Isn't that a wonderful thing for us to be thinking about today? That we purpose our life to understand God's truth, to speak it with love, and to not back down from it, to be faithful to God and his word no matter what. And that's not easy sometimes. Being faithful to God and his word is not a popular thing in our culture. To be honest, it wasn't a popular thing in this culture, even among the Jewish people. Sometimes it's not popular among Christians within the church. We want to hear what we want to hear that matches the things we already think are true. And that would be taking the newspaper to interpret the Bible. No, the Bible must interpret real life and who we are and what we believe is important. So it says, and all of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, that's from north to south, from all of Israel, recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word, and Samuel's word came to all Israel. So what's happening here as a very young boy, now maybe as this story is progressing, we don't have a timeline, but maybe progressing through his teen years to his early 20s, God continues to speak, not to Eli, who's still alive, but God continues to speak to Samuel, who now is the one who preaches to the people. And the people recognize God is with him. God is in his words. God has given him these things to say. The question that I have for myself and for all of us is this. Do the words that we speak reflect the words of God? Do our friends and neighbors and the people we work with and the people we do business with and the person that waits our table, do they recognize when we speak that we have a relationship with God, so that when we open our mouth, something of God's truth is coming out? Or do they hear us like our neighbors, belly aching and complaining and criticizing and bemoaning our situation and saying, woe is me, woe is me? I had a conversation, a friend of mine and I had a conversation with another friend of mine on Monday. It should have taken 3 or 4 minutes. It was about a 30-minute conversation. And when we left, as we were driving away, my friend who I was leaving with said about the other person that we talked to, he said, he whines an awful lot, doesn't he? And I had to say, well, yes, he does. He's a good guy, but he finds fault with everything. I'm not trying to point the finger at my second friend in this story and say he's the problem and we're not. We all have our issues that we struggle with. But the point is, the things that come out of our mouth, Jesus says, they come out, whatever comes out of our heart is what, out of our mouth is what comes out of our heart. And so when Jesus is teaching, he says it's not the things that you eat that pollute you, it's what's in your heart that pollutes you that comes back out of your mouth. That's what people see and hear and understand. And so I want to encourage us as Christians to be like this young Samuel, that the words that come out of our mouth reflect the things of God in a way that brings glory and honor to God. Now you might say, well, God's speaking directly to Samuel. He doesn't speak directly to me. Yes, he does. It's right here. It's right here. God's words are here for us to learn how to use and to use them well. We have no excuse, at least not that one. I believe we have no excuse for not being able to say things in a way that will glorify God. Now, we may mess up sometimes. We're not. James says no person is perfect in their speech. If they are, they're perfect in every way. I recognize that. But what is the general direction of our conversation? Is it to glorify God? Is it to be God's person? Is it to repeat the truth that God has planted in our heart? Or is it to focus primarily or strictly on ourselves and what I want, how I feel, and where I'm going, and what I'm doing? You know, the word in our language that is most in opposition to God, Chip's opinion, is the word I. I is the first letter of the word idol. Idol comes from a root word that includes the concept of adore. And so when we practice idolatry, in one sense, we are adoring ourselves. And some of us are really in love with ourselves. Everything in life is I. And it just doesn't work out. That does not glorify God. But let's continue. The Philistines are at work because God's people are being unfaithful to him. And they have this battle in chapter 4. And the Israelites lose. And I want to skip down to verse 3 of chapter 4. It says, when the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, why did the Lord bring defeat upon us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that it may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies. Now, it was common practice among the pagan people that they would carry their idols in front of them when they went into battle, so their gods would protect them. The Romans did the same thing. They had those big poles with the symbols of their gods, many gods on them, and they went into battle with them. We carry a flag. Battle standards were about bringing blessing to the battle. And so when the Philistines kill about 4,000 of the Israelites in one day, what is the answer? Well, bring the Ark of the Covenant up and put it out there. Let's be like the pagans that live around us. Now, God didn't tell them to go get the Ark of the Covenant. They did it on their own. But the point that I would like to make about this is they thought that the ark would save them. They didn't think God would save them. That's not the message in these verses. They thought that the ark would save them. The ark was a symbol of the reality of God's presence. God said, I'll dwell on top of the ark between the wings of the cherubim in the tabernacle. He didn't say it was travel, take me wherever you go. I'm somewhat amused by people that used to have that little image of a saint hanging from the mirror. I forget which one was the saint of travel, where we have a little cross hanging from the mirror in our car, as though that symbol is somehow going to protect us. Now, maybe you have one in your car and it's for a different reason. But the basic idea behind it is this ideology, idolatry, if you will, that a symbol will make the difference. We have not had in our church building here at Two Rivers for about 3 months, because of some other things going on, we have not had a cross anywhere visible in the building. It is amazing to me how many people are upset that we don't have a cross hanging on a wall. Now, symbols are important. Symbols are important. Symbols are motivators. Symbols are things that draw us back to our roots. Why do you think we've had all the fuss over the flag and kneeling for the Star-Spangled Banner? Because symbols are important. That piece of cloth flapping in the breeze represents something greater, something different from just a piece of fabric. Symbols change the world. They do. They have a power of their own. For example, probably all of us have seen the famous photograph from New York City, probably from the 1930s, maybe early 1940s, of the 4 or 5 men sitting on a steel beam building a skyscraper, and they're sitting there eating their lunch. When you see that, what do you think of? What does that symbol remind you of? Well, it reminds you of the strength and the industry and the wealth and the power of our country, of the let's get it done capabilities that we have. Another famous photograph from the end of World War II is the sailor kissing the girl on Times Square. I love that picture. It's a great photo. It's iconic. All of these are what we call iconic icons, things that stand for something else. That was the end of World War II. It was a time of celebration. Peace was going to begin. And joy filled the air. And the guy grabbed the girl and kissed her. And some photographer caught it. Made a fortune. Other photographs that are iconic are not as pleasant. I believe, in Chip's opinion, 2 photographs ended the Vietnam conflict. One photograph was of the South Vietnamese general who executed a tied-up, handcuffed prisoner by shooting him in the head, and it was photographed and published in American newspapers. We didn't do things like that to our prisoners. Here's the person who we're defending committing what we believe to be an atrocity. The other picture from Vietnam was of the little girl running naked down the road, having been burned with napalm. Those 2 photographs changed the American mindset about the war in Vietnam. Regardless of all the political implications that were going on at the time, those 2 photographs spoke to the soul of America. Symbols, photographs are important. I am convinced that during the Civil Rights Movement, the most important photograph that helped to change the American public towards the civil rights marches was the one where Bull Connor turned the dogs loose on the children. And that boy leaning forward into the dog as the dog bites him. I remember seeing that picture in the photograph in the newspaper and saying, no matter what else is going on here, that's not right. It's just not right. Symbols are vitally important. So having a cross in a building may not be real important to me, but it might be important to somebody else. But symbols are not all important. Hophni and Phinehas, Eli's sons, were going through all the motions with all the right symbols and all the right procedures. They were asking for the right sacrifices. They were doing them on the right time, days. They were doing them the right way. They were stealing for themselves out of it. They were taking advantage of the system. But the fact that they went through the ritual was important to the people. It was blasphemy to God, but it was important to the people. I want us to think about 2 other symbols, if you will, that are very important to us as Christians. One is baptism. Baptism is a symbol. It is our pledge of allegiance to God that from now on, Jesus owns my life. I am being born again. It is more than just a symbol, but it is this symbol that makes the difference both from God's perspective and from a human perspective. It is the act of faith that says, God has transformed me. God has moved me from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of his dear Son. Watching a baptism, seeing baptisms is very, very important. But if our heart's not in it, if our faith is not real, the baptism is merely an outward act with nothing. Another one is our communion service. It is vital. It's God-given. We need to have communion consistently each Sunday to the best of our ability. We need to be faithful in that. But the bread in and of itself is nothing. The cup of grape juice all by itself is nothing. I can consume both those here at home. It's what those things represent, the power that's behind them. That is what's important, the power of Jesus' death and burial and resurrection. Now, these folks here in Samuel's time, chapter 4, got it all backwards. They said, if we bring the ark will win the battle. No, they needed God. They didn't need the ark. They needed God. And we don't need communion as much as we need God. We don't need our assemblies as much as we need our God. We don't need baptism as much as we need the God who is the power that cleanses us in baptism. This is so vitally, vitally important. During this year of COVID, we have almost every church has expanded into what we're doing tonight. We do live broadcasts, streaming, whatever word you want to use to describe the technology. And it's wonderful. You know, on Wednesday nights when we met at the church building there on Slatestone, we'd have 15, 18 people out. Now we'll have 30, 40, sometimes 50 that watch the program on Wednesday night. And it's not watching a program, it's listening to participate in the best way that we can. We'll have the same thing on Sunday. But what I'm also finding is that while that part is an asset, there's also a liability. We become, I'm trying to think of the right word because I don't want to be offensive. We become lazy. How's that for a word? I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, both within our fellowship and within other fellowships, that have said, I don't know if I'll ever go back to the church building. I love pajama church on Sunday morning. I make my coffee, I sit in my pajamas, I'm on my sofa or recliner, I have my coffee in my hand, I keep a little piece of bread and a cup of grape juice with me, and I take communion at home, and it's just so much fun and so much more relaxing. That's just wrong. What about the fellowship? What about the encouragement? What about the being one body that gathers together and not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together? Now, I realize we can't do everything the way we used to with COVID and all that. I'm not throwing rocks. I think most congregations are doing the very best they can. Well, let's not become so enamored with the symbol of a live stream. I'll watch it at home like it's a TV program, and forget the power of God in coming together, in being his people, gathered, strong. There is strength in numbers. There is strength in the affection that we share. There is strength in relationship. And those are also very, very important to us. And so they go on with the ark. I'm going to very quickly run through a couple more chapters. They take the ark into battle and they lose again, and the Philistines capture the ark, and it gives them nothing but trouble. Because while the ark is only a symbol, it has God's power stayed with it. And so the Philistines try to take care of it, and God brings all kinds of troubles on them because of that. And eventually, the ark is going to be returned to Israel. And then we're going to learn the rest of the story next week from chapters 7, 8, and 9 of what happens to what happens to Eli, how Samuel is installed, and the steps that he takes to be God's man in a time of continuing turmoil among God's people. Samuel is a great man, but he is only a great man to the extent that he is faithful to God. Remember the words that he said, that Eli told him to say? Speak, for your servant is listening. Here I am, speak, for your servant is listening. And we are great people for God when our attitude is like Samuel. Speak, Lord, your servant hears. Command, and I will obey. God's word is truth. God's word is powerful. God's word changes things. And most of all, it changes you and me. We cannot carry God's word into the world to transform this world, this culture that's falling apart. We cannot transform the culture of this world unless we allow God to transform us first. God is all good. He is all powerful. He is all wise. He is all knowing. He is all loving. And he is the God of justice. We never want ourselves to be in the position of Hophni and Phinehas, Eli's sons, where we go through all the right motions in all the right ways, but our heart is really in taking care of ourselves. May that never be said of Rosemary, of any one of us individually, of God's church worldwide. Let's be about God's business because God is King. Jesus is Lord. And in his name we do these things. Not because they're easy, and not because they're fun, and not because it'll make us look good, but because God has said, be holy like I am holy. We are called to being God's chosen people. Let's live that with dignity and honor and power from the reality of God in our lives, not from the symbols that we express it in, but from the power and the reality of God living within us. Thank you for tonight. We'll continue this story next week in 1 Samuel, and I hope that you'll join us again then. I pray that the things we've talked about tonight have been encouraging for you. I do not want to be discouraging. I want to preach God's word in a way that challenges and says, me too. Me too. I can be part of God's plan. I am part of God's persons on this earth. Thank you. Let's pray together as we end tonight. Father, as we go back and look at examples of people who were called to be your men and women, we are challenged and we are encouraged to know that you can take the most common and ordinary among us and do great things. So, Father, my prayer is that you will exert your power in our lives, that we will put our full weight down in faith and trust in you, in your Son, in what he has accomplished, and Father, that we may be that voice in the wilderness crying, prepare the way of the Lord. Get ready. Jesus is coming again, and he will judge all of us, the nations, and all of us as Christians. Father, may we be like the 10 wise maidens who kept oil in their lamps, who were faithful and diligent, waiting your return. And in that process, Father, may we be that light to the people around us that you want us to be. Thank you for your grace and your forgiveness, for your mercy. Father, we are weak, we fail, we deliberately choose the wrong sometimes. But like David, may I end this prayer this way. May the words of our mouth and the meditation of our heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. In Jesus' name I ask. Amen. Thank you all. Hope to see you again next week, or you'll see me anyway, and that will be great. Good night. God bless.